Hey, vinyl community, it's Mazzy here, and this is a response to a thread on 10 piano players, my 10 favorite piano players, started by James Griffith in the United Kingdom, and repeated by many of you wonderful vinyl community members. And so if you're not a vinyl community member, you're watching this, enjoy it. So this is a personal, not totally in order, although I'm finishing with a favorite of mine. And I got a couple honorable mentions beforehand. Now, I'm going to start out, before I even talk about this is only sort of pop and rock and roll, so there's no jazz. Although I got to do a shout out to Ray Charles. R&B piano player, jazz, but R&B, just an amazing, probably #1 in my book if I had to just pick one. But he kind of bridges so many genres of music. He does country music records, does R&B records, does some jazzy stuff, but I'm just mentioning him. The other 3 artists I'm going to mention that are honorable mentions before I dive into my top 10 are 3 established, famous artists who aren't necessarily considered great pianists. However, to me, these piano players just have an amazing tonality to their work. They have a certain subtlety to their piano playing. They're not necessarily great, massive, just keyboardists. Like, I hate to say it, I have no prog artists, and even everyone considers these prog players with 16 keyboards in front of them the masters, Rick Wakeman and the like. No offense to those guys, no Keith Emerson, no no Pink Floyd, no anything like that. But I want to show, just briefly, I want to give a little shout out, just a little extra thing, to John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and Neil Young. Now, all 3 of these are not amazing piano players. In fact, except for Paul, maybe Neil and John are very rudimentary piano players. But they have a sound that is so amazing and just so simple. I mean, the piano on Imagine, the piano on almost anything on Plastic Ono Band, just his piano playing when he writes on the piano is just stunning. Maybe I'm amazed. And Paul McCartney's piano playing, his piano playing on Let It Be and Hey Jude is simple from piano player's status, but wonderful. And Neil Young, After the Gold Rush, my favorite Neil Young record. Obviously, you always see him with his acoustic guitar, but on his solo albums, the live albums, as well as the studio albums, when he plays the piano, piano alone, it's just wonderful. So those are my extras, not included in my top 10. Again, not technically amazing keyboard players, but I got to include them. So going backwards, in a way, from number 10 to number 1, my opinion, and I'm starting with Benny Andersson of ABBA, just the keyboard alone on Dancing Queen. Now, some may say, really? But a great songwriter, great at melody. The last few years, my good friend sent me this record, and this is a beautiful, perfect Sunday morning record. Benny Andersson piano on Deutsche Grammophon, a somewhat pop classical record. There are some ABBA type flourishes where he takes melody of some of the ABBA song, but it's all solo piano, and it's just a beautiful record. There's a lot of original recordings, original pieces of music for this. Stockholm by Night, Thank You for the Music, which we know about that. Chess, The Day Before You Came. Things he's written in his career, but just solo piano. This is a stunningly beautiful record, and a lot of people don't realize what a great musician and piano player. But I love these piano players I'm showing because of their songwriting and how they incorporate the keyboards into their bands and into their personal work as well. So then I'm going with almost two piano players in this band, one organ, one piano, and that is obviously Gary Brooker, one of my favorite vocalists, but the great piano player in here, and the organ player, Matthew Fisher. Those two together really made Procol Harum a special band for my personal taste. I'd probably say this, Salty Dog, would be the album to get if you don't have any of their records. You all know them from the great organ bit, the intro, the semi-Bach piece, and A Wider Shade of Pale. But I'm going with Matthew Fisher and Gary Brooker on as a tag team keyboardist with Procol Harum. One of the great New Orleans sound piano players is Dr. John Mccartney. New Orleans piano, that little honky-tonk, but the New Orleans style. Just an amazing sound. This is In the Right Place, Wrong Time, Right Place, Wrong Time. Great piano player. Any of his stuff, just a New Orleans sound on his piano playing. I don't think I could make a list of piano players without mentioning Mac Rebenek, aka Dr. John. And sticking with the whole New Orleans sound, another amazing piano player and songwriter and arranger is Alan Toussaint. Alan Toussaint, again, New Orleans, an amazing player. I don't have anything to show you in here, but great New Orleans sound, great piano player. I did see him once live, and as I did Dr. John and Procol Harum and Neil Young. In fact, I've seen all these people live except for John Lennon so far, but great piano player. The next artist is really special, and a lot of people don't bring him up, but he's a great piano player. Billy Preston, piano and organ player. Almost a Beatle, almost a Stone, played with the Beatles, played with the Stones. Billy Preston, that's the way God planned it. If you've ever seen the concert for Bangladesh, you'll see his amazing performance in that. Just love this guy. He was on tour with George Harrison in '74 as well. Now, Billy Preston on Get Back, the organ playing on Get Back, the rooftop concert, he really added something that the Beatles didn't have in terms of live. If the Beatles had gone on to play live in 1970, 69, 70, when they were working on this project, the Let It Be, Get Back project, I think Billy Preston needed to be on the road just to fill out the sounds of the Beatles. So the only other member, aside from Eric Clapton, there are other musicians that played on records, but in terms of household names, or somewhat household names, Billy Preston on keyboard on this, and Eric Clapton on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. And the other record, I think, to me, is one of my all-time favorite Billy Preston's performances, is Melody, the piano on Melody on Black and Blue by the Rolling Stones. It's just beautiful. Has a great sound, really well recorded. So pull this record out and put on Melody and blast it, turn it up, Rolling Stones. Now, next, one of the great piano players, and is Leon Russell. Leon Russell was in the 60s a member of the Wrecking Crew when he had his crew cut before he went on to really write on his own, but wrote My Masquerade, great song that was covered very successfully by George Benson in the 70s on his breakout jazz guitarist who became a pop sensation. A Song for You is an amazing song. Roll Away the Stone, Delta Lady. Listen to the piano playing on Delta Lady. It's just got a great southern sound. He's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. And since I'm showing this, he's the one that put together the band and arranged the music for Joe Cocker. Also someone who was great on the concert for Bangladesh. His piano playing was amazing. Him on this record and how he brought these musicians together to back up Joe Cocker on the road. Great documentary film on this too. Great Top Hat, but he had a really nice run of string of albums in the 70s. Leon Russell is a favorite of mine. Now, maybe not hip by some standards, but I'm showing Elton John next. Elton John was with Bluesology, did some great stuff with Alexis Corner before he went on his own. Reginald Dwight's his real name. I'm going to show this album because this is a live album from 1971, recorded as a live broadcast from New York radio station just as he was coming. The piano playing on this is the Record Store Day Extended Double Edition, which has the entire show, is just a wonderful sounding record. You could pick any Elton John record, especially the first from 1970, 69, 70 through 75, and any one would be great. But I'd say this because it's live, it shows his immediacy. It's really a power trio in a different sense of power trio. But his piano playing, it's just wonderful. Take Me to the Pilot, 60 Years On. There's a whole Bad Side of the Moon, Burn Down the Mission, Honky Tonk Woman, great piano playing. Elton John, I don't know, some of you hipsters may not think so, but it has to be in any top 10 list. And again, you see where I'm coming from in my introduction. These piano players are great songsmiths, songwriters, not just a great solo artist. I think it's really important when to play, when to go on and do some fancy, dancy keyboard piano playing, and when just to keep it less is more. And I think pretty much all these keyboard players know that. And of course, right, Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. Again, any early 70s or mid 70s Stevie Wonder record, up to maybe Life of Plants, which is kind of a wild soundtracky type thing, bizarre album. But Stevie Wonder, great keyboard player. Used some electric stuff, used synthesizers. Amazing, again, another amazing songsmith and songwriter and vocalist. I'm including these two together just because, and I'm probably not fair to put them as one, so my top 10 list isn't quite as, there's more than 10. Rock and roll at its best in the keyboards. The killer Jerry Lee Lewis, just watching him play piano in any footage from the late 50s, early 60s, but especially Great Balls of Fire. The great, probably the last of the great 50s rock and rollers left. And then the late Little Richard, who just died this past week. Great keyboard player. Good Golly Miss Molly, Hey, 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 Lucille. Great singer, great howler. These two people, I saw them both luckily back in the 70s separately, but I feel blessed that I saw both Jerry Lee Lewis, the killer, and Little Richard. Little Richard obviously influenced Paul McCartney in his singing a lot. Okay, my number one keyboard player. What do you think it is? Not a household name by any stretch of the imagination, but from number one in terms of melody, in terms of solo, someone who was really a go-to keyboard player who would go on the road with so many bands, go-to session musician that to me was more than a session musician, played with some of my favorite bands of all time, and that's Nicky Hopkins. Now, Nicky Hopkins is no longer with us. Nicky Hopkins, on this there's a great song, Edward the Mad Shirt Grinder, which is probably the closest he's done to a wild solo heroic performance. As also he covered when he played with Quicksilver Messenger Service. He went on the road with them. He played with Quicksilver Messenger Service. He played on several albums by the Jefferson Airplane. He was at Woodstock on stage with Jefferson Airplane. Great piano player. He hung out in San Francisco a lot during the late 60s, early 70s. He played with a Steve Miller Band on several of their albums. There's a song in here called Baby's House on this album, Your Saving Grace, by the Steve Miller Band. Listen to Baby's House and listen to just a gorgeous piano arrangement. It's subtle, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. He's played with George Harrison on All Things Must Pass and several of his albums. He plays on Imagine with John Lennon, and he's on the video Imagine, the film of Imagine, on all the different incarnations of Imagine. So he's my number one piano player. Played with the Rolling Stones. He's played with, just look at his discography of the sessions that he's played on. So I'm ending my number one piano player with the great Nicky Hopkins, and that's my top 10 plus keyboard players. So Mazzy loves you, and thanks for watching, and just listen to the music, enjoy it. It's wonderful stuff. Take care.